Hello everybody, this is DJ Pharaoh. Welcome to another SPE Studio tutorial. Today I'm going to be teaching you the basics of synthesis using Massive. Now you can follow along with Massive, or if you have a different synthesis plugin, then you'd be able to follow along with that as well. But either way, watching this tutorial is going to help you understand synthesis better. So let's start up an instance of Massive and get started. All right, so I have an instance of Massive pulled up right now, and if you don't have your Massive, pulled up, then all you need to do is insert a new MIDI track. And once you've inserted your MIDI track, all you'll have to do is go to your plugins folder over on your browser, and then scroll down to find Massive. Drag it onto the track. And now you have Massive pulled up. Okay, now I'm going to close this. Now, if you don't know where your Massive window went, then you're going to have to make sure you go down here and click down in this little window, and then hit this wrench icon where it says Massive, and that's going to pull up your Massive window. All right, I already had an instance of Massive pulled up. So what I'm going to do is just work with that one. So let's pull it up and see what we have. Now, this might be an intimidating interface if this is the first time you've ever used a synthesis plugin, but I assure you, with just a few tips here, you're going to be able to get moving right along easily working with Massive or another similar synthesis plugin, Serum. But before we get into this plugin itself, I'm going to teach you a little bit about an important part of sound design called ADSR. So let me just pull up this diagram here quick. So ADSR is essential for sound design, for making any sound, or at least understanding how your sounds work. Okay, so this graph here is showing amplitude over time for a sound, and ADSR is exactly what is written here: attack, decay, sustain, and release. So the attack of a sound is how soon the sound will start to get to its peak volume. The decay is once it lowers from that peak volume. Sustain is how long, or the volume that it stays at after it's already reached its peak volume. And the release is how long the sound will continue after the sound is triggered. Depending on how you're making the sound, this can react differently. So as we see, it's amplitude over time. So amplitude just means your loudness, and then time means time. All right, so let me go back in to Massive here. Now, when we look at Massive, you can see that there's 3 oscillators. There's a few modules, okay? So the first one that you should take note of is the oscillator section, which is these here. So these are going to actually generate the sounds that you're making in Massive. So you have 3 oscillators, oscillator 1, 2, and 3. And if you go into this section here, one of the things you might notice, actually, let me just demonstrate with 1 oscillator. Okay, so you have 3 here that are all on, and if you click these blue dots, that will turn them off. So right now we have 1 oscillator going. If I hit some keys, I have to arm the track here to be able to play it. So if I hit some keys, we're only hearing 1 of our oscillators. Now if you click on here, you have different wavetables or different sounds that you can put into your oscillator to be able to generate different sounds. So if I click on this one here, you can hear that it sounds a little bit different. So I'm going to go back to, what were we on, Polysaw 1. We'll work with Polysaw, or we can work with, let's just go with Square Saw 1. Okay. So here you see these 3 knobs. This is the first thing we're going to mess with, and also a pitch. So we have wet position, intensity, and amplitude. As we were talking about before, amplitude just controls the loudness of the sound. Okay, so that's what that knob is doing. All I'm doing is holding a note so you could hear it getting affected. So we're just going to leave that all the way up so you could hear what's happening. Now let's turn these other ones down. Then you also have wet position. So you're not going to be able to hear that very well without turning up the intensity a little bit. So let me just turn that up halfway. Subtle changes, but you could still hear it. Okay. Now, if we move the intensity, you'll be able to hear the intensity of the sound is now changing. You also have pitch here, so you can move the pitch to affect the sound as well. Okay, and the next section here that we have is a filter. But before we get to that, I'm going to get back to our principle of ADSR. So if you look down here, inside your global section, you have this global section here. Inside you have envelopes, so this ENV, all four of these are envelopes, LFOs, and a performer and a stepper. These are interchangeable, except for envelope 4, and I'll show you why. So if you click on envelope 4, you see this diagram looks pretty familiar, right? Just like our ADSR. So this envelope 4 actually controls the ADSR of your massive synth. Don't ask me why they picked envelope 4. That's just how it is. So you see here we have attack. So if I'm pressing keys and then I move my attack back, see how it's now taking longer for the sound to peak in volume? Okay, I'm going to move that back. And we also have level here to see how much is peaking. Then your decay. Your level. So now you can make like a plucky sound. So a lot of different control is within just this first envelope. So I'm going to set it back to kind of how it was. Now that we're a little bit back to normal, oh, and we can't forget about the release. So we have the A, D. This is more like our S for sustain. This section I'm going to skip because it can be too confusing if you don't know any sound design. And then release here. So I've hit the key and then let go of it, and then it slowly is fading out. So that's how your release works. It's kind of like the tail end of the sound working. All right, and let's move on in our synthesis. So we started making a sound in here. Say we like it. We like how it sounds. Then we're going to move on to our filter. So if you see these sliders here on each one of your oscillators, what you can do with those is actually route them to one of these two filters. Okay? Well, we're only using one, so we didn't need to slide these others two. But I just did it so you can see it happening. Now let's move on to our filter. So if we add in low pass 4, now I'm pressing a key and you see you can't hear anything. And that's because our low pass filter, the frequency is set all the way to 0. So there's no frequencies under that, so you're not going to be able to hear anything. But if I move this up, now you can start to hear stuff. Okay? Now, so if I hold this sound, now say that I wanted to be able to get that sound to continuously happen. We also have a resonance filter here, or a resonance knob here for our filter. So say I want that sound, that wubbing sound, to continue within my sound. But I don't want to play with this knob because I want to just have the sound do it automatically. What you're going to use for that is modulation. And the cool thing in Massive and a lot of other synths is that you can add modulation to any of the knobs and almost any part of the synth that you want to control. And you can do that with these controllers down here, which would be your envelopes, LFO, performers and steppers. Okay, we're actually going to start with an LFO just because it's the easiest to hear this effect happening. And what we're going to do is click on this little compass looking icon and drag it onto one of these squares under our knob. Then what you do is you'll click and drag up, and that's just going to show how much this is going to be controlling the frequency modulation from 0 to whatever. I kind of just think of it as a percentage, but as long as you know it's from 0 frequencies to all the frequencies, then it will kind of make sense. So now if I hold a key, you can hear it's doing that wubbing sound without me needing to move it, because this modulator is just moving the filter knob back and forth on its own. Now, say I wanted to have it do that faster, then I would just make this rate faster on my LFO. Now, say I wanted to control this with one of my controllers over here. Now, what I can do is take my envelope 1 and drag the compass onto this LFO's rate. So I'll just take the little compass icon, drag it, and let's say we want it to move backwards. We want it to go from fast to slow. So then I would just click and drag down, and it would have it go backwards. Maybe not so much. And now I can use this envelope to control how this LFO's rate is being controlled. So if I move this attack back, it gets it to slow down if I put a long attack on it. So that's one way you can add timing to LFO. I'm actually going to get rid of that, turn it off. Now, you see how it's set to restart here? You can also set it to sync. And now what it's going to do, it's going to use the timing of your song. So this is 120. So whatever tempo you set your song to, it's now going to be doing the modulation according to your song's tempo. And that's one thing that I wish Massive had. I wish it had a knob for you to turn to get to these different numbers for your tempo ratio, so that you can better make a sound go to the tempo of your song if you wanted to modulate or automate that. But you can get pretty close just using the restart position instead of the sync. So then you'd be able to use this knob here to kind of dial it in close to what you want, which is in most cases good enough, but sometimes you want to be more precise. Okay, so we were able to modulate an LFO filter. Now let's see what else we can control. So I'm going to turn this off for now. And just turn the filter up. So another thing that we can do is use an envelope to say control the pitch. So let's use envelope number 2 and add it to the pitch. And I'm just going to go up. These are semitones, so 12 semitones will be an octave. So I'm going to have now envelope 2 is going to bring up the pitch 12 semitones. So it's doing that pretty fast. What if I wanted to slow down? Or what if I wanted to go a little slower or rise slower? We'd also have the level up so that it stays at the peak that we sent it to, which would be 12. And then if we slow this down even more, now you have a basic riser that you can use for, I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy. You might want to add a few more effects on it, but you have a basic riser that you can use on a track. Okay, and let's see what other stuff we could play with. What if we not only affected the cutoff, but we also affected the amplitude of this sound? So let's put our LFO 5 back onto this cutoff. Speed it up. And now what if we wanted the wet position to be affected by number 3? Slow that too. Oh, gotta add click and drag here to add the automation. And then turn the level up. And all that's going to do is add subtle improvements to the sound that you're trying to create. Hopefully by now your sound design third eye is kind of opening up and you realize how many different sounds that you can make with 3 different oscillators, 2 filters, and all of these different ways to modulate. And not to mention all of the other functions that are within Massive and other synths that I encourage you to just explore and try to make your own sounds. So let's do a couple more experiments. Let's take the LFO again. I'm going to turn these off. So all I'm doing is right-clicking to turn these on or off and do those different actions. All right, so let's take this LFO, put it back on here, see how it sounds. Take another LFO and add that onto our rate for LFO 5. Let's actually turn that down a bit. So yeah, this wubbing effect that I'm doing is one of the sounds that's attributed to dubstep, but a lot of different sounds or a lot of different genres of music will be using modulation like this to create their sounds. But you can especially hear it in things like dubstep and future bass and a lot of electronic genres. But you can even do this to kind of make a side chaining sound effect on one of your tracks. It just depends on what you're trying to use it for. So let's also use LFO 5 to modulate the amplitude. Turn it down all the way up. And then right here, this is your master volume. So if your sound was a little bit too loud or too quiet, you could turn it up here. Yeah, and then once you're through crafting your oscillators the way you want, have it going through a filter, the next places it would be going through is the amplifier and your effects. So there's a few different effects, like things like reverb, basic effects that are kind of like the stocks that are already in Ableton. So say we wanted to put some reverb on this. You can even have something like one of the envelopes controlling maybe like the size of your reverb. Or maybe the intensity of the effect too. You could do something like that. But yeah, there's endless possibilities of the different combinations of things that you could make. And I could sit here all day and play with some of these sounds to try and make some cool leads for my next tracks. Another thing that you might want to know is that you can save your sounds. So what you would do is you would hit save, and then this box will pop up, and you can name it whatever you want. I find where you want to put it. So I just have a folder where I have all of my Massive presets, and then you can put that wherever you want. I would name it something that you would remember, or like for myself, I write Pharaoh and then whatever I want to name the sound that I made. just so that I can easier find it amongst some of the other sounds I may have downloaded. And you can also find other sounds within Massive if you go to your browser here. So if you click on this browser, it'll give you a list of all the different presets that are inside of your Massive synth. So some of these came with it. In my case, I've downloaded some different Massive sounds and packs. And then say if I double click on this, it's going to now be using this sound, which is a little loud. I'm going to turn it down. So now you have a different sound that you can use. And if you go back to your synth, you can now see how this sound was made. And you can then reverse engineer it to try and make your own sound, or edit it to make your own sound. And this is going to be another good way to help you understand how to use Massive and how to make the sounds that you want. So one of the better ways to learn is to go through your browser, or even download a pack of sounds and find some sounds that you like, or a sound that you're trying to get it to sound like, and look at some of the things that are happening within the synth to try and replicate similar sounds. And that's one of the best ways you can learn to use Massive. That's how I learned, just doing that, finding different synths and tweaking them. And then once you have a solid grasp of how everything within Massive works, then you're going to be able to make whatever sound comes to mind. And once you can do that, you can create all of your own synths, all of your own melodies. You can even do drums in Massive. I'm more of a sample guy when it comes to drums, just because it's faster. But if you wanted to make, say, your own sample pack, using synthesis is another way to do something like that, or just to make sure you have your own signature sound. Okay? We just are about finished here. I think that was everything that I wanted to show you as far as basics. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below or send us a message. We'd love to hear from you and try and make more tutorials that are going to suit especially beginners or any level. I'll probably do another tutorial that is more based on intermediate synthesis, where I just jump right in and start making a sound. But yeah, thanks for tuning in for another SPE Studio tutorial. Again, I'm DJ Pharaoh, and have a fun time producing.